actor of the state, Ukrzaliznychpostach enterprise, and the topic of our briefing. What are the obstacles for buying diesel fuel at a reasonable price, and why the railway workers sue the Antimonopoly Committee of Ukraine? Good afternoon. I'm acting director of Ukrzaliznychpostach company. The major function of this is the centralized purchases for the Ukrzaliznychpostach Ukrainian railways. Yesterday, on May 27th, we actually lodged the suit to the district administrative court of the city of Kiev regarding the decision of Antimonopoly Committee, which actually forbids us to use the so-called price formation when purchasing diesel fuel. So what it's all about, the annual amount of diesel fuel purchases about 5.5 billion hryvnia, if you're talking about the money equivalent for the Ukrainian railways. This is a strategic product, and definitely we would like to buy the fuel for the lowest price in the country. And again, briefly, the background of this issue. In March, we announced a new tender with absolutely new rules of the game, with absolutely new principles of price formation, by introducing the so-called the Platz indicators, which are used by all the major players in this market in their activities. And we also propose to our potential suppliers a certain formula which made provision for changing the price depending on the quotas of the Platz, changing the price depending on the exchange rate. And we actually offered for the whole period of the contract to fix the so-called premium bonus, which would fix their expenses, incomes, margin, etc., etc. Before developing this formula, we actually contacted absolutely all the oil traders, the major players, like foreign companies, Belarus oil company, major importing companies like Saka. There were some Ukrainian manufacturers and producers, and the whole market, honestly speaking, was very happy to respond to the introduction of this formula, because the traditional approach to the purchase or procurement of diesel fuel, when the contract fixed the price in hryvnia, and let's put it this way, when fulfilling implementing the contract, neither the supplier nor the buyer could not understand how this price is going to change a week or 2 weeks from this point of time. They believed our approach to be very correct and much required. So the announcement of that tender had to take place on 9th of April. On the 8th of April, one day before disclosure of this tender, we received the decision of the Antimonopoly Committee ordering us to stop the tender. That was based on some kind of complaint of some of the Kremenchuk company, Top Energo Resource, and this complaint read that this formula discriminates it as a supplier and puts it in some kind of the, let's say, competition deprived corner, etc. So this complaint was written on April 7th. It reached the Antimonopoly Committee on April 8th, and the same day, with absolute fastness, the Antimonopoly Committee passed a decision to stop the tender. Well, just skipping some of the details, we had already 3 meetings with the Antimonopoly Committee, and actually 2 of those meetings, the Antimonopoly Committee dedicated to the following: to the maximum degree, this, let's say, the approach which we used or applied to this specific tender. I attended both of those meetings with our legal officers and experts from the procurement department, and I would say that I have never seen or heard about such a more than let's say unbiased meetings of those. None of the claimants actually appeared in those meetings. The claimant had 30 days before the launching of the tender and the disclosure to send us a letter, because according to the law, the potential participant or bidder can send us a letter and say and inform us that, please, dear sirs, I believe that some of the provisions of your tender, whatever else, are of discriminatory nature, so I do not agree with that. Even we could reconsider. But now we can say that this kind of genes thing, I mean, it's specifically specially ordered action or prepared action. As a result, on May 8th of this year, we received the decision of the Antimonopoly Committee, which read, number one, you cannot apply the dollar exchange rate because this discriminates Ukrainian traders. You cannot use or apply the formula, or as they wrote in their letter, that we did not provide the necessary sufficient justification for using this formula altogether. And the third point, they asked us to introduce some kind of recalculation factors to be applied for residents and non-residents. But once again, the first two items were the major ones for us, and actually they forbid us to or prohibit us to use the formula we do not.
We had a third meeting with the Collegium of the Antimonopoly Committee, and owing and thanks to the new chair of this body, and we are thankful him for that. He managed to have this third meeting arranged after the decision already made. Together with collegium members, he delved into the issue and asked the collegium to hear us again. We spent 3 hours in heated discussions, after which our formula was a bit modernized to include just one amendment, which concerned profits or costs borne by the supplier. And after these lengthy discussions, the collegium said that okay, guys, you please change and include the language in the contract by saying that the premium to be received may be negative as well. We made, as we had been said, but the formula itself was not changed at all. And given it remained unchanged, we asked the Antimonopoly Committee to issue us a kind of document, maybe to cancel its previous decision. We filed a letter to them notifying of changes to the tender dossier and related changes to score basis, and we asked for some clarifications to be provided, but we were denied from that by the Antimonopoly Committee. Even after that meeting that we had, after they acknowledged that the formula does work, the collegium, not the committee itself, but the collegium, we should be clear about that, has been incapable to officially authorize and approve our formula. Up to this moment, they're not ready to either provide us clarifications or substantiation, and this resulted in us filing to the court against the Antimonopoly Committee to have their decision cancelled. Why we feel it is important for us? Because we did some model computations to see what would happen if we, starting from April, would use this formula-based procedure for our tendering procedure. The Ukrainian railway company consumption rate for diesel is around 100,000 tons, and depending on some indicators like Platts fluctuation or exchange fluctuations, we may have up to 2,000 hryvnia savings from each ton, which would shave about a couple of millions every time we procure it. And we would really need this money, these savings, if we had. You also know of procurements held by the Ministry of Defense, way they do it, and I do know that despite them having also formula-based bidding procedure, and there have never been any scandals about that with the Ministry of Defense. So if we see some higher prices on fuel, it can be because of certain risks and compensations for risks involved, be it exchange and Platts fluctuations, etc. And normally the suppliers try to put higher price in their bids. But then when we have contracts signed and when trade procedure begins, the buyer effectively is unable to alter the price or lower the price. The legislation does provide some language as regards changes in prices, and the law on public procurement has a clear indication of how the price on procured good or service may be changed. And it says specifically that if it is agreed by and between the parties to the contract, it can be this exchange base rate may be included. So there are no arguments against price fixing in hryvnia, practically none of them. Negotiations between the parties may lead to price change or price to stay. But again, there is a clear arithmetic at play when Platts has changed, when prices have changed, but the premium remaining the same. It's very clear. So during the negotiation phase, there are no arguments in favor of any deliberate change of price. And given the daily data that Platts agency gets every day, so with Platts indicator and with exchange rate going down, the buyer may buy more, or it may stay on his position if the trend is reverse and the indicators go up. This is actually the subject matter of our dispute with the Antimonopoly Committee. I'm ready to take your questions now. Alexandra Danko, Union News Agency. The first question is, given the Antimonopoly Committee has blocked this recent tender, how you deal with the situation, you as the railway company and the sector in general, is there any critical situation with diesel fuel supply? And I also know that it is the 8th time that the Antimonopoly Committee has cancelled some of tenders since the beginning of the year. Are you going to sue them in courts on that? The situation with diesel fuel as of today is not critical. We had about 5-day long reserve supply at place, and we are still capable of buying about 21,000 tons more before new contracts need to be signed. After the recent decision of the committee, and that was, I think it was on 25th of May that we decided to change our tender dossier to return to our previous hryvnia-based approach. Formally, we may not use the formula because it has been banned by the Antimonopoly Committee. And in order to somehow diminish the price in current conditions, we decided to do two things. First, we further split our procurement lots. Previous tenders we had 5 lots, 20,000 ton each. Now we have each of them split to 5,000 ton. We also introduced some drastic changes to payment conditions. Before, we had 75 banking days duration of payment period signing mentioning contracts. At this time, we introduced 5-day payment term, and I think it will help the suppliers who have never participated in our tendering procedure before to be better able to use this possibility to work with us. But we need to understand that there are companies that have very strict internal corporate rules of playing on this market, and these rules are formula-based. The companies that traditionally work according to the formula will most likely will never come to our tenders. There is also one more important point. It is about market reaction on Antimonopoly Committee decision. After it became clear that the Antimonopoly Committee was going to block the decision, we circulated a letter to major market players with 4 questions in there, asking them about their opinion whether the formula discriminates or non-discriminates both domestic and external suppliers, whether it is understandable, whether it complies with efficiency criteria, and whether it affects competition field. And the Antimonopoly Committee, in his previous decisions and sessions, repeated and reiterated many times that the formula provides a narrower field of play for domestic suppliers by tying the price to exchange rates. And one of the first responses to our questionnaire that came from Ukrzaliznychpostach, one of our local suppliers here. I can provide you with a copy of their response. And Mr. Horoshcak, the head of the company, said that they see no discrimination at all of them as a local domestic supplier. And the situation fuel-wise, it stands like I've described. And the second question concerning the blocking of other previous tenders, we had quite an interesting discussion with the Antimonopoly Committee this winter, and we are in courts against them now. It concerned the coal that we were unable to procure to provide heating in our railroad cars and our related facilities. Initially, the block was due to some Lvivka-based companies filing a claim just 2 days before the opening of bidding documents, and it effectively stalled our procurement at the point. And we are deep into court deliberations in our relationships with the Antimonopoly Committee. Thank you. Any more questions? Competition magazine of Cherenko Svetlana. Do you think that the Antimonopoly Committee may be found in violation of the anti-competition legislation by acting like this? Well, from what I know, they were to introduce certain standstill period for tendering procedure. It was suggested by the Commission, much like they have it during the elections. There is a certain standstill period, couple of days when no more claims can be filed. But this was just an initial suggestion, and it has never been suggested as an amendment of the existing legislation. And I'd like to share my personal opinion. I'm not sure if it complies with the law or not, but I think that every claim the Antimonopoly Committee gets lead to automated suspension of the tendering procedure, and only after that the committee kicks in and starts investigating. The existing procurement legislation provides for 20 or 30 calendar days since the notice to the opening of bid documents. Then there is a phase of acceptance, and the contract signing phase. I have a standstill period before signing the contract for 10 days, waiting for claims. All these considerations together, we have calendar cycle of 45 days, and then the Antimonopoly Committee gets a claim, checks whether the claimant has paid due fee, and automatically blocks our 45-day long tender. I think it's a nuisance for us. Have you ever tried to go in more detailed and sincere open discussions with the leadership of the Antimonopoly Committee on that? Well, I don't see how we're better anyhow than any other bidder, be it the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Defense. I think we are not going into personalized discussion with them because it would be a sort of pressure that we try to exert on them. No, we've never tried to speak about some preferences, say, for our Ukrainian railroad company for that purpose. Any more questions in the audience? Please try to be short. Alona Blatnikova, Magistral newspaper. Question regarding the Nibelon company, which incriminates about $100 million debts that the railroad company owes to them. Unfortunately, it's not a question for us because we only do procurement for the Ukrainian railroad company and we have no relationship with the Nibelon company. And the final question, when you're expecting court session to be? We've applied just a couple of days ago, and as soon as we are notified by the court about the upcoming session, we'll immediately issue a press release to notify that. Then let me thank Mr. Horoshcak, and we do hope for some fruitful end of this litigation. Thank you. We have our next briefing in 3 minutes.